The afternoon sun hung low over the small African town, its rays gliding across dusty roads and quiet rooftops. In one corner of the crowded marketplace, a boy no older than 12 sat on an old wooden crate, his eyes fixed on a small radio that rested beside him. The radio was cracked at the edges, and sometimes the music came in with static, but to him, it was the most precious thing in the world. Every time he heard the sound of the piano, he closed his eyes and drifted into a world that felt far away from the noise around him. He imagined himself sitting at a real piano, his fingers dancing across smooth white keys, creating melodies that spoke to hearts. The sound was magic to him, something pure that could make even the hardest day feel soft. He didn't have a piano, of course. In fact, he had never even touched one. But that didn't stop him. Behind his home, he had built something that he called his piano, a piece of old wood with lines carved into it to look like keys. Each line represented a note he had memorized from listening to songs on the radio. Every day after helping his mother at the market, he would sit in the shade and practice, pressing on the wood and humming the sounds as if they were real. His mother would often smile at the sight of him. Life was not easy for them. She sold vegetables at a stall, sometimes staying late into the evening just to earn enough for dinner. Their home was small and made of clay walls, but it was filled with love. She always told her son that dreams don't cost money, and if he worked hard enough, someday, somehow, those dreams might come true. One evening, as the sun dipped below the trees, the boy walked past the community square and noticed something different. A group of men were setting up large speakers, shiny microphones, and colorful lights. A few curious people had already gathered around to watch. The boy stopped in his tracks when he saw it, a keyboard sitting right there on the stage. The key sparkled under the fading sunlight, and he could hardly believe his eyes. It was the first real piano he had ever seen up close. He stood there for a long time, unable to move. The men were tuning instruments and laughing, clearly excited about something big. From the whispers he heard, it seemed a famous band from the city had come to perform the next day. People said they were professionals, that their shows were full of energy and soul. The boy's heart started to beat faster. All he could think about was that piano. That night, he couldn't sleep. He lay on his thin mattress, staring at the roof, his mind replaying the image of the piano over and over again. He wondered what it would feel like to touch the keys, to play even a single note. He imagined the sound filling the air, the crowd watching, the feeling of belonging in that moment. He promised himself that tomorrow he would go back. Even if it was just to watch, he couldn't stay away. The next morning, the marketplace buzzed with excitement. People were talking about the concert, and the boy could barely focus on helping his mother. He kept glancing toward the square, where music and laughter echoed as the band rehearsed. His hands were restless. He tapped the table, mimicking rhythms he had memorized. Finally, his mother looked at him with a gentle smile. "Go," she said softly. "I know where your heart is." He ran as fast as his small legs could carry him, his sandals kicking up little clouds of dust behind him. When he reached the square, a large crowd had already gathered to watch the band prepare. The musicians were adjusting their instruments, tuning guitars and testing the sound system. And there it was again, the piano. It looked even more beautiful. In daylight, the black and white keys gleaming as if they were alive. The boy stood at the edge of the crowd, watching every move. The band played a few notes, and the sound was unlike anything he had ever heard. It was powerful, full of color and life. He felt each note travel through his chest, filling him with a mix of joy and longing. He wanted to be part of it. More than anything in the world, he wanted to touch that piano. He took a deep breath and began to make his way through the crowd. People looked down at him curiously, some smiling, others too focused on the music to notice. When he reached the front, one of the musicians noticed him standing there. The man had kind eyes but looked busy. "Hey there," he said, leaning toward the boy. "What's up?" The boy hesitated for a moment, then spoke softly, almost in a whisper. "Sir, can I play your piano just for a moment?" The man blinked, surprised. Then he let out a short laugh, not out of cruelty, but disbelief. "Play the piano? You know how?" The boy nodded shyly. A little. I've never touched one before, but I know how the notes go. A few of the other band members turned to look, smiling at the sight of a brave little boy asking to play. The man looked around, unsure what to say. This piano is expensive, my boy, he said kindly. It's not a toy. The crowd nearby had started to pay attention. Some people giggled softly, thinking the boy was just being playful. But he didn't back away. He looked at the musician again and said quietly, I only want to play one song. Please, just one. There was something in his voice, something honest, almost pleading, that made the man pause. The boy didn't sound like he was asking for fun. He sounded like he needed it. After a few moments of silence, the musician sighed and said, All right, just one song. Be careful, okay? The boy's eyes widened. He couldn't believe what he had just heard. The crowd murmured in surprise as he stepped up onto the stage. His heart was beating so fast he could feel it in his throat. The piano sat before him, shining like treasure. He reached out slowly, his small fingers trembling as they hovered above the keys. The first touch sent a chill through him. It was smooth, cool and real. For a moment he forgot where he was. All he could think of was the music inside his head. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and began to play. The sound that filled the air made everyone freeze. It was soft at first, uncertain, but within seconds it grew into something pure and powerful. His fingers moved with surprising grace, finding rhythm and melody as if the keys had been waiting for him all along. He played a tune he had made up himself, partly from memory, partly from heart. The crowd that had been laughing just moments before fell completely silent. The musicians stared in disbelief. The boy's hands moved faster, his expression calm but focused. Each note carried emotion, telling a story of longing and hope. For those few minutes, time seemed to stop. Even the man who owned the piano stood there, mouth slightly open, unable to look away. He could hardly believe that someone so young, someone who had never even touched a piano before, could play with such feeling. When the boy finally lifted his hands, the last note lingered in the air like a whisper. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then a wave of applause broke out. The sound filled the square, echoing off the buildings. Some people cheered, others clapped with tears in their eyes. The boy stood there, breathing heavily, looking around in disbelief. He hadn't expected applause. He hadn't expected anything at all. He just wanted to play. The musician stepped forward, still stunned, and gently put a hand on the boy's shoulder. That was... He began, then stopped, shaking his head with a smile. That was something special, kid. The boy smiled shyly, his heart pounding in his chest. He thanked the man quietly and stepped off the stage. The crowd parted for him, still clapping, still whispering in amazement. He didn't know it yet, but that one brave moment had changed everything. That evening, as he walked home under the dimming sky, he could still feel the piano keys beneath his fingers. His mother was waiting for him by the door, and when she saw the light in his eyes, she knew something had happened. He told her everything, every little detail, and she listened in awe, her hands covering her mouth. When he finished, she hugged him tightly and whispered, "See? I told you. Dreams don't need money. They just need courage." And as he lay, in bed that night, the sound of applause still echoing in his ears, he smiled to himself. For the first time, the dream that once felt so far away suddenly seemed close enough to touch. The next morning, the boy woke up earlier than usual. He could still hear the sound of the crowd clapping in his mind. It felt like a dream, but it had really happened. He had played a real piano. He had touched those keys and people had listened. That thought alone filled his heart with warmth. When he stepped outside, the air felt different. Neighbors smiled at him. Some even patted his shoulder as he passed by. "That was something yesterday," one man said. "You play like you were born with music in your hands." The boy smiled shyly, not knowing what to say. He wasn't used to attention. At the market, his mother had already heard all the stories. People kept coming to her stall, talking about how her son had played in front of the crowd and amazed everyone. She listened with pride, her heart swelling each time someone mentioned it. She kept saying the same words with a soft smile. He loves music. That's all. Later that day, the boy couldn't resist returning to the square. The band was still there, packing up their instruments and talking about their next show. He stood quietly at a distance, unsure if they would remember him. But one of the musicians noticed him and waved. "Hey, piano boy," the man called out with a grin. "You're back." The boy walked closer, his face lighting up. "I wanted to say thank you," he said softly, "for letting me play." The man chuckled. "You earned that moment. You made half the town cry, you know that?" A few of the other band members laughed, still amazed. One of them pulled out a phone and said, "We watched your video last night. Someone filmed you playing and posted it online." "Online?" the boy repeated, confused. He didn't have a phone, and the internet was something distant to him. "Yeah," the man continued, scrolling on his phone. "It's everywhere now. People can't believe a boy your age played like that." He turned the screen to show him. The boy saw himself on stage, his small hands moving across the keys. There were words under the video and a number that kept changing fast. "What does that number mean?" the boy asked curiously. "That's how many people have watched it," the musician explained. "And it's going up every minute." The boy stared at the screen in silence. He had never imagined that what he played could reach people beyond his town. It felt unreal. As the band loaded their equipment, the lead musician looked at the boy thoughtfully. "Do you go to school?" he asked. "Yes," the boy said quickly. "I go in the morning. But after school I help my mother." The man nodded. "Do they teach music at your school?" The boy shook his head. "No, we don't have instruments. But I practice at home. I made my own piano from wood." The musicians exchanged glances, some smiling, some looking surprised. One of them said quietly, "That's real passion right there." Before leaving, the band leader said, "We're performing again tonight. Why don't you come back? Maybe we can do something together." The boy's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really," the man said. "Bring your heart and your music." That entire day felt endless as the boy waited for evening to come. He tried to help his mother at the market, but his mind was somewhere else. He couldn't stop thinking about playing again. His mother noticed how distracted he was and finally said with a smile, "Go on, I can see your heart's already there." When the sun began to set, the square came alive once more. Lights glowed, drums echoed, and people filled the open space. The band was tuning their instruments again, and the crowd was even larger than the day before. The boy slipped through the people and stood near the edge of the stage watching. The same musician spotted him and motioned for him to come closer. "Good, you made it," the man said. "We'll call you up later, all right? Just listen for your cue." The boy nodded, feeling his chest tighten with nervous excitement. He stood by the side, waiting as the band started their first song. The energy in the air was electric. People clapped, danced, and sang along. It was a celebration of sound, and every beat made his heart race faster. After a few songs, the man grabbed the microphone and said, "Last night, something amazing happened right here on this stage. A young boy asked to play my piano, and I didn't expect what followed. Tonight, I think we should all hear him again." The crowd erupted in cheers, remembering the small boy from the previous day. The boy stepped up, feeling hundreds of eyes on him. His palms were sweaty and his legs trembled slightly, but the excitement around him gave him courage. He sat at the piano once more. The stage lights felt warmer tonight, softer. The band waited behind him, giving him space. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and began to play a new tune, one he had created that very afternoon. The melody started gentle, like a whisper, then grew louder, more confident. The crowd fell silent as the sound spread through the air. Even the night seemed to hold its breath. His fingers moved smoothly, almost as if guided by something greater than himself. The music told a story without words, a story of hope, of dreams that refused to die. Halfway through, the band quietly joined in. The guitar followed his rhythm, the drums beat softly behind him, and together they created something beautiful and alive. It was no longer just a boy playing a piano. It was a connection between souls, between a child's dream and the world's rhythm. When the final note faded, the crowd exploded in applause. People cheered louder than before, clapping and shouting. The boy looked up, eyes wide with joy. The band members smiled proudly, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The musician who owned the piano leaned over and said quietly, "You belong on a stage, kid." After the show, the band gathered around him backstage. The man with the phone showed him the new video from that night. It was already spreading faster than the first one. The boy watched in awe as people commented things like, "This child is pure talent," and "Someone help him reach his dream." The band leader crouched down and looked him in the eyes. "Listen," he said gently. "You have something very special. You play with your heart, and that's something no one can teach. We're leaving town tomorrow, but I don't think your story should end here. Would you like to learn music properly? We know people who can help." The boy's mouth opened slightly, unsure if he had heard right. "Learn music? With a real piano?" The man smiled. "Yes, with a real piano. With teachers. With others like you who live and breathe music." For a long moment, the boy didn't say anything. His heart was full, almost too full to speak. Finally, he nodded. "I'd like that," he said softly. "But my mother." "She needs me." The man thought for a moment. "Then let's talk to her. Maybe we can find a way that works for both of you." Later that night, they walked together through the quiet streets to the boy's small home. The mother was outside washing dishes under a single light. She looked up as they approached, a little worried at first, then curious. The man introduced himself and explained everything. How her son's music had touched so many people, how the video had gone viral, and how they wanted to help him get proper lessons. She listened in silence, her eyes glistening. When he finished, she looked at her son, who stood nervously by her side. "Is this what you want?" she asked softly. The boy nodded slowly. "Yes, Mama, I want to learn. I want to play like they do." She reached out and touched his cheek, smiling through her tears. "Then you must go. You have a gift, my child. The world needs to hear it." The musician promised that the band would stay in touch and that they would help arrange everything. Before leaving, he looked at the boy again and said, "Tomorrow we'll come back with news. Rest tonight, you've earned it." After they left, the boy sat outside for a long time, looking at the stars. The air was still and his mind was full of music. He thought about how just a few days ago his only piano was a piece of wood behind their house. Now people across the world were listening to him play. He felt grateful, not proud, not boastful, just deeply thankful. For the kindness of strangers, for the courage to ask that one question, for the mother who never stopped believing in him. That night, as the wind rustled softly through the trees, he whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning." And though he didn't know what the next day would bring, he felt ready for it, with his heart full of hope and his dreams finally within reach. The next morning came with a sense of quiet excitement that filled the boy's small home. The first rays of sunlight spilled through the window, landing softly on the floor. His mother was already awake, preparing breakfast, while the boy sat at the edge of his bed, still thinking about everything that had happened the night before. He could hardly believe that strangers had offered to help him study music. It felt unreal, like a story told in dreams. All his life he had imagined playing on a real piano, learning from real teachers, but never once did he think that day would actually come. Yet here he was, waiting for a band from the city to return and talk about his future. His mother watched him quietly as he picked at his food, lost in thought. "You're not eating," she said gently. He looked up, smiling nervously. "I'm too excited, Mama. What if they don't come back?" She gave a soft laugh. "They will. People who see real light in someone don't turn away. You showed them something rare." He nodded, trying to believe her. He helped her clean up the dishes, but every few minutes, his eyes drifted toward the dirt road outside, hoping to see the familiar van that belonged to the band. By midday, the sound of an engine broke the silence. The boy ran outside, his heart pounding. The same white van from the concert pulled up near their home, raising a small cloud of dust. The band members stepped out, carrying papers and smiling as they saw him. "There he is, our little musician," one of them said warmly. "We told you we'd come back." The boy's mother came to the door, wiping her hands on her apron. The band leader greeted her respectfully and explained what they had arranged. Through the video that had gone viral, a local music organization in the city had taken an interest in the boy's story. They wanted to offer him a scholarship to study music, full training, lessons, and even a small stipend to help his mother. The woman listened silently, her hand over her mouth. It was hard to take in such news all at once. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she looked at her son and smiled, her eyes full of tears. "You see what your music has done? You followed your heart and now it's opening doors." The boy didn't know what to say. He stood there frozen, his mind spinning. When do I start?" he asked quietly. "In a few days," the man replied. "We'll take you to the city. You'll meet your teachers, see the school, and start learning right away." The boy's chest tightened. He had never left his town before. The idea of going to the city both thrilled and scared him. He looked at his mother, unsure. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder. "Don't worry," she said softly. "I'll be fine here. You go and learn. Make something beautiful out of your gift." That evening, the whole neighborhood gathered around their small home to celebrate. People brought food, sang songs, and congratulated the boy. The same neighbors who used to see him as the quiet child who played on a piece of wood now looked at him with pride. The old radio that had once inspired him played softly in the background, and under the glow of lanterns, laughter filled the air. When the night grew quiet, the boy lay in bed staring at the ceiling. He wasn't thinking about fame or success. He was thinking about his mother's face, about the piano, about how one small moment of courage had changed his life. 2 days later, the van came again. The boy packed a small bag with clothes, a notebook, and his mother's old scarf. She tied it gently around his neck and hugged him tightly. "Never forget where you come from," she whispered. "But also, never doubt where you can go." The journey to the city was long. The boy stared out the window, watching the landscape change from dusty roads to busy streets filled with cars and tall buildings. He pressed his face to the glass, amazed by everything he saw. The city felt alive, full of sound and color. When they arrived at the music center, he couldn't believe his eyes. The building was large, with glass doors and wide hallways that echoed with the sound of instruments. Pianos, violins, drums, and voices blended together like one big song. The boy's heart raced. He felt small in this world, but also alive in a way he had never felt before. A kind woman greeted him and led him inside. "You must be the young pianist we've heard so much about," she said with a smile. "Come, let's show you your new home." They walked through rooms filled with instruments. Each space had a piano shining under bright lights. The smell of polished wood filled the air. The woman stopped in front of one of the rooms. "This one's yours," she said softly. The boy stepped inside. A black upright piano stood in the corner. It was simple but beautiful. He reached out and touched the keys gently. They felt cool and familiar, like the first piano he had played back in his town. He sat down slowly and played a few notes. The sound was perfect, clear, warm, alive. He couldn't stop smiling. The woman watched him play for a while, her eyes soft. "You've got a gift," she said quietly. "Let's make sure the world hears it." Over the next few days, the boy started lessons. His teacher was an older man with kind eyes who had spent his life teaching young musicians. He listened carefully to the boy's playing and was amazed by his natural sense of rhythm and emotion. "You play from your heart," he told him. "That's something no one can teach. But now we'll give your heart the language it deserves." The lessons weren't easy. The boy struggled at first with reading notes and keeping time. But he never gave up. Every evening, long after other students had left, he stayed behind, practicing quietly. Sometimes his fingers hurt, but he didn't mind. Every sound that came out of the piano reminded him of where he had started. Back home, his mother received letters from the school. They told her how well her son was doing, how quickly he was learning. Neighbors would gather around her to hear updates. Each time she read those words, her eyes would fill with pride and gratitude. One afternoon during a music class, the teacher asked each student to play a short piece. When it was the boy's turn, he played a soft melody that he had written himself. It was simple but full of feeling. By the time he finished, the room was silent. His classmates clapped and the teacher smiled. "That's real music," he said. "It's not about how fast you play, but how much of yourself you put into every note." As weeks passed, the boy began to change. His hands grew stronger, his confidence brighter. He started performing in small recitals, and each time more people came to listen. The same band that had discovered him kept in touch, cheering him on from afar. They often said, "You remind us why we fell in love with music." But even in the middle of all the progress and praise, the boy never forgot his home. He kept his mother's scarf close, sometimes placing it on the piano while he practiced. It reminded him of her voice, her kindness, and the dusty roads where his dream began. One evening, as he sat alone in the practice room, He looked at the piano and whispered, "I'll make you proud, Mama." Then he began to play the same tune he had played that first day in the square, the one that made the crowd go silent. Only this time his fingers were surer, his rhythm deeper, his sound fuller. Outside the room, a few teachers paused to listen. One of them said quietly, "That's the boy from the video, isn't it? He's going to be something special." And though the boy didn't hear them, he felt it. Every note he played carried his story, the dust, the laughter, the hope. He wasn't just learning to be a musician. He was learning to tell his truth through sound. That night, as he walked back to his dorm room, the city lights shimmered around him like tiny stars. For the first time, he felt that maybe the world was listening, and deep inside, he knew this was just the beginning of a much bigger song that was still waiting to be played. Months passed, and the boy's life had changed in ways he could have never imagined. The dusty streets of his small town felt like a distant memory as he immersed himself in a world filled with music, teachers, and endless opportunities to play. Every day was long and sometimes tiring, but the boy's heart was full. He was learning things he had never even dreamed of, discovering rhythms and melodies, scales and harmonies, and, most importantly, learning how to pour his feelings into every note. Even though he was surrounded by so many new faces, the boy never felt alone. His mother's love and encouragement traveled with him in the small keepsakes he carried, the scarf she had given him, and the letters she sent regularly. She reminded him of where he came from, the dusty roads where his first piano had been just a piece of carved wood, and the courage it had taken to ask a simple question that had changed everything. One afternoon, while practicing a particularly difficult piece, the boy heard a knock at the door. It was one of the teachers holding a phone. "It's urgent," she said, handing it to him. Confused, he picked it up and saw a video notification that had already gone viral again. His performance from the open-air square months ago was now reaching millions of people worldwide. People were sharing it, commenting, and even asking who this incredible boy was. The boy could hardly believe it. He had never thought that a single moment of courage could ripple out so far. People from countries he had only heard about were leaving messages filled with hope, encouragement, and awe. He felt overwhelmed, but in a quiet, warm way that made him realize just how far his music could travel. The band that had first given him a chance contacted him again. "We can't believe how many people are watching you now," one of them said over the phone. "Your story is inspiring the world. We want to do more for you. How would you like to play at a big concert in the city? Thousands will be there." The boy's heart raced. Performing in front of thousands of people was something he had only imagined during quiet evenings when he touched his wooden piano at home. He had never dreamed that it would actually happen, but he nodded a little nervously. "Yes," he whispered. "I want to do it." The weeks leading up to the concert were intense. The boy practiced tirelessly, working on new pieces, perfecting his technique, and learning how to perform confidently in front of large audiences. His teachers encouraged him every step of the way. "Remember," one of them told him gently, "the music comes from you. Let people hear your heart, not just your fingers." On the day of the concert, the boy felt a mixture of excitement and nerves he had never experienced before. The auditorium was massive, with lights that glimmered like stars and seats filled with people who had come to hear music, many unaware of the young boy who would soon take the stage. He could hear the whispers, the clapping, and the rustling of programs in the audience, all creating a symphony of anticipation. Backstage, he took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. The same band that had first discovered him stood beside him, offering smiles of encouragement. One of the musicians gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "You've got this," he said. "Just play like you did the first time, with courage and heart." When his name was called, the boy walked onto the stage. The bright lights made the crowd almost invisible, and he focused on the piano in front of him. It was perfect, polished, and ready. He sat down, his hands hovering above the keys, and closed his eyes for a moment. Then, with a deep breath, he began to play. The first note floated into the air softly, catching the attention of everyone in the hall. It was delicate and pure, a single sound that seemed to hold the story of his life, the dusty roads of his town, the wooden piano he had built, the love of his mother, and the courage it took to ask for a chance. As his fingers moved, the music grew stronger, weaving melodies that felt both familiar and new. Every note carried emotion, filling the room with a sound that made hearts stop and eyes widen. The audience listened in awe, completely silent, as if the music itself demanded respect. The boy played a mix of classical pieces he had learned and his own original tunes, creating a performance that was uniquely his. Halfway through, he noticed a few people in the front rows recording the performance, their phones glowing like tiny lanterns in the dark hall. For a brief moment, he felt a pang of nervousness. But then he remembered the first time he had touched a piano, the first time he had played in front of a crowd in his town. He realized that it wasn't about them. It was about the music, about expressing what he felt inside. And so, he played on, letting every thought, every memory, and every dream flow through his hands. When the final note lingered in the air and finally faded, there was a heartbeat of silence. Then the audience erupted into applause that seemed to shake the entire hall. People were on their feet, cheering, clapping, and shouting in amazement. Tears flowed freely from some faces while others smiled with a mixture of disbelief and joy. The boy opened his eyes, feeling the warmth of the moment wash over him. He had never imagined that playing the piano could feel like this, like he had just touched the sky and shared it with the world. The band members behind him clapped, some whistling, some shaking their heads, all beaming with pride. The lead musician leaned down and whispered, "I told you, you were born for this." After the concert, the boy was invited to give interviews. People wanted to know about his life, his journey, and the courage that had brought him here. He spoke softly, explaining how he had started with a simple wooden piano at home, how his mother had encouraged him, and how he had simply asked for a chance when he first saw the real piano. His story touched everyone who listened, inspiring people from different parts of the world to believe that courage and passion could overcome any obstacle. News outlets picked up his story, and soon he was being featured on television and online platforms. People all over the world were inspired by the young boy who had dared to dream. Letters, messages, and gifts poured in from strangers who wanted to support him, teach him, or simply share their admiration. The boy was overwhelmed by kindness he had never expected, but even with all the fame and recognition, the boy remained humble. He often thought of his mother, who had stayed behind in their small town and the dusty roads where he had first begun to dream. Every time he played, he dedicated a piece of his heart to her, remembering her love, her sacrifice, and her unwavering belief in him. One evening, after returning from another successful performance, the boy sat alone at his piano in the music center. The room was quiet, the lights dim, and the air filled with the faint scent of polished wood. He closed his eyes and began to play the song that had started it all, the tune he had first played on the wooden piano in his village. As he played, memories of the marketplace, the band, and the small crowd of neighbors who had cheered him on returned. The music felt alive, carrying with it the journey he had traveled, the challenges he had overcome, and the hope that still burned bright inside him. He didn't know what the future held, but he understood something important now. Music was more than just sound. It was a way to connect with people, to share stories, and to touch hearts. And no matter where life took him, he promised himself that he would never stop playing from his heart, never stop dreaming, and never forget the courage it had taken to ask for that first chance. The boy had become more than just a young musician. He had become a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the smallest voice, when brave enough, could echo across the world. And though he had millions of people watching him now, he still played for the same reason he had started, to feel the music, to live it and to share it with those who needed to hear it most. That night, as he looked out of the window of the music center, the city lights sparkled like tiny stars. He imagined the thousands of people who had watched him perform, the letters he had received, and the future that awaited him. And deep inside, he felt a quiet certainty. This was only the beginning. His music had the power to travel far beyond the city, far beyond the screens, and touch hearts in ways he could only imagine. The boy knew that somewhere, in his small town, his mother was thinking of him, proud and hopeful. And that thought gave him strength, courage, and the quiet joy of knowing that every note he played carried a piece of home, a piece of love, and a piece of the dreams that had started it all. The boy's journey had brought him far from the dusty streets of his small town. He had learned more than he ever imagined possible. His fingers had grown strong and confident, his sense of rhythm and melody more precise, and his heart fuller with the joy of sharing music. Yet despite all the lessons, applause, and recognition, he remained humble. always remembering the wooden piano he had first built at home and the courage it had taken to ask for a chance. It was early morning when the band contacted him once again. "We have something special," the lead musician said over the phone. "A music festival is happening in the city, and we want you to play in front of everyone. This is your stage. Thousands of people will be there. Are you ready?" The boy's heart raced. A crowd bigger than he had ever imagined. Lights, cameras, and the thought of performing for so many people was both exciting and terrifying. But deep inside, he knew the answer. "Yes," he whispered. "I'm ready." The days leading to the festival were a whirlwind of preparation. He practiced tirelessly, not just to perfect the pieces he would play, but to control his nerves, to focus, and to feel the music in every fiber of his being. His teachers encouraged him, reminding him that talent alone was not enough. Heart and courage were equally important. Finally, the day arrived. The festival hall was enormous, filled with rows of seats, bright stage lights, and a sea of faces eager for music. Backstage, the boy took a deep breath and looked around. The musicians he had met months ago smiled at him, offering nods of encouragement. One of them whispered, "Remember, play from your heart. That's all anyone will ever ask." The moment came when his name was announced. He walked onto the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding him. The crowd roared in applause, but he focused on the piano in front of him. Sitting down, he placed his fingers gently on the keys, closed his eyes, and breathed deeply. The first note rang out soft and clear. The hall grew quiet, everyone listening intently. The music flowed naturally from his hands, each note carrying a story: his life, his journey, his dreams, and the struggles he had overcome. He played melodies he had learned, tunes he had created, and pieces that captured his soul. Each note seemed to float in the air, touching hearts in a way words never could. Halfway through, he noticed a few journalists in the front row, their cameras focused on him. For a brief moment, panic tried to creep in, but then he remembered the first time he had played in the square, the tiny crowd, the wooden piano, and the band who had believed in him. He remembered his mother's gentle smile and her words, "Dreams don't need money. They just need courage." That thought grounded him. He played on, letting the music carry him. The hall seemed to disappear. There was no audience, no cameras, just the piano, the notes, and his heart. The melodies told the story of a boy who had dared to dream, of a mother who had sacrificed, of courage that had turned a simple wish into a reality. When the final note faded, there was a pause, a silence so deep it seemed as if the world itself was holding its breath. Then the hall erupted. Thousands of people stood clapping, cheering, and whistling. Some cried, some smiled broadly, and others simply sat in awe, overwhelmed by the purity of the music and the story behind it. The boy stood, trembling, but smiling, bowing deeply to the crowd. Behind him, the band members cheered, some laughing with joy, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The lead musician came forward, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You've done it," he said softly. "You've shared your heart with the world." After the performance, journalists and fans wanted to know more. They asked about his life, his inspiration, and how he had learned to play. The boy spoke humbly, telling them about the wooden piano at home, the small crowd in the marketplace, and the band that had given him his first chance. Every word carried the sincerity of someone who had faced obstacles and never given up. Messages of support poured in from all over the world. People shared their admiration, offered help, and expressed how much his story had inspired them. Letters arrived from young musicians who had been encouraged to follow their dreams. Emails came from music teachers offering lessons and advice. The boy's life, once simple and quiet, had expanded into a world of connection, kindness, and endless possibilities. Despite all this, he never forgot where he came from. He wrote to his mother every week, describing the people he met, the places he visited, and the music he played. He made sure to send money back home, helping her with small things, ensuring she lived comfortably. And every time he played, he felt her presence beside him, her love guiding his fingers, reminding him of the courage that had started it all. Months later, the boy returned to his town for a visit. The streets looked the same, dusty and familiar, yet everything felt different. Neighbors who had watched him grow up ran to greet him, hugging him tightly and praising his achievements. The wooden piano he had first made was still there behind his home. He ran to it, touched the carved keys, and smiled. It had been simple, yet it had held his dreams, shaping the boy he had become. He decided to play one last tune there, just for the people who had watched him grow, for the memories of his mother's encouragement, and for the dusty streets that had taught him patience and hope. As the notes echoed in the small open space, people gathered, listening in silence, remembering the boy who had once played with nothing but courage and a wooden piano. The boy knew that this was more than music. It was a story of perseverance, love, and hope. His life had changed, but he had stayed true to the heart of what had brought him here. The courage to ask, the willingness to try, and the belief that dreams, no matter how small, could grow into something extraordinary. Back in the city, he continued to learn, to perform, and to inspire. The music festivals, the interviews, and the performances were now part of his life, but he remained grounded, never losing sight of the boy who had once begged a band to let him play a piano in a small square. As he practiced one evening, the boy thought about the future. He imagined himself traveling to other countries, performing in grand concert halls, teaching other children, and sharing the magic of music with the world. Yet he also knew that no matter where he went, he would always carry a piece of his town, his mother, and the wooden piano in his heart. One quiet night, after another long day of practice, the boy sat at the piano alone. The room was empty, the lights soft, and the air calm. He began to play a melody that he had composed himself, blending the classical tunes he had learned with the rhythm and spirit of his homeland. The music was tender and joyful, filled with hope and gratitude. As he played, he felt a deep sense of peace. He had achieved more than he had ever imagined, but more importantly, he had remained true to himself. The courage that had led him to ask the band that first day had carried him through every challenge, every stage, and every audience. It had turned a small dream into a life full of music, inspiration, and love. The boy realized something profound. Talent alone was not what had brought him here. It was his heart, his determination, and his willingness to step forward when no one else believed he could. It was the small moments, the quiet hours of practice, the wooden piano, his mother's unwavering support, that had shaped the musician and the person he had become. He looked out of the window, seeing the city lights twinkle like stars. Somewhere in his hometown, his mother was thinking of him, proud and hopeful. Somewhere, the people who had once watched him play in the marketplace remembered that small boy with big dreams. And somewhere, children who had heard his story began to believe that they too could follow their dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. The boy smiled, knowing that his journey was just beginning. The music he played would continue to reach hearts, cross borders, and inspire countless others, and he knew that no matter where life took him, he would always carry with him the courage to ask, the determination to practice, and the heart to share his gift with the world. And so, from a small boy with a wooden piano in a dusty town, to a musician touching lives across the globe, the story of courage, hope, and music came full circle. His journey had begun with a simple wish, a polite question, and a dream too big for his small hands, but in the end, it had become a melody that the world would never forget. The boy leaned back, took a deep breath, and let the final note of his melody linger in the room. The sound was soft, full of promise and hope, echoing into the future. And as he closed his eyes, he whispered quietly to himself, "This is only the beginning."